I was not a model student myself, unfortunately. When I came to college, I did struggle and I had those challenges. But I also found those people that were instrumental in helping to keep me engaged with my higher education journey.
I'm in it for the transformation that can take place, because when change happens, a ripple effect occurs, and it impacts families, communities, and future generations.
We want to see students come to our college and get the credential that they want and need to have to change their lives and their families' lives and their own trajectory.
For many, education's the bridge from, say, like their current state to their aspirational state. And I like to know that I had a hand in helping someone take a step towards, that future self.
Having AI at our disposal is all about meeting students where they are.
AI isn't about replacing the human side, but instead amplifying it.
It's able to take a lot of the redundancy out of the day-to-day of the admissions counselor work that a lot of time was ultimately dreaded.
That helps our team concentrate on complex problems when students call rather than answering simple questions.
I do what I do to open the doors of opportunities that may never have existed before, because those opportunities ultimately transform lives.
Visit element451.com and discover how a digital workforce can help empower your team to focus on what really matters.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to First Movers, a brand new pulse check series from Enrollify. I'm Rhea Vitalis.
And I'm Andrea Gilbert from Everspring.
In this series, we're sitting down with enrollment leaders who aren't waiting for answers. They're creating them.
These are the teams testing bold ideas, redefining ROI, and adapting in real time to a landscape that refuses to stand still.
Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to First Movers, a new pulse check series from Enrollify brought to you by Everspring. Everspring is a digital and AI enablement partner helping colleges and universities solve urgent challenges and capture new market opportunities. Today, we're exploring AI's evolution in higher education with the dynamic duo from DePaul University's Driehaus College of Business in Chicago, James Mourey, Director of Online Learning, and Jim Mourey, Associate Dean of Graduate Programs. James has been leading AI adoption across DePaul's campus and teaching essential AI skills to students, while Jim researches consumers' relationships with emerging technology and AI, and teaches improv to help students sharpen their communication skills and creative thinking. Also joining us is Andrea Gilbert, who leads partner and solutions marketing here at Everspring, bringing 2 decades of higher ed agency experience. And I'm Rhea Vitalis, your host. I lead Everspring's research on AI's impact on enrollment and translate the trends into practical moves for marketing and admissions teams. So with that, let's jump in. Let me start with some of the numbers that I think tell a story about where we're at right now in business education. 86% of employers expect their businesses to transform with AI by 2030. More than half are already paying wage premiums for AI skills. And yet 69% of online learners say their university hasn't integrated AI into the curriculum yet. So there's a real gap here, but also a huge opportunity. James and Jim, you're at DePaul, and instead of waiting to see how this plays out, DePaul has decided to act. So can you share more about what you're doing and what DePaul is doing within the business school?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll get started. I'm glad you identified that. So in my research, I have identified this AI acceptance gap. And you see this time and time again, where companies want talent that have AI experience, and yet there's still this strange hesitation from institutes of higher education where for some reason, they don't want to integrate it into the experience. And that's, to me, that just seems crazy, because part of our responsibility is training the next generation of workers and employees that go out into the market. So we need to be sensitive to what's out there. So there really is this strange gap. And what we're doing to address that is really thinking about how to integrate AI ethically throughout the curriculum, right? Instead of running away, we're embracing it. And we're doing it at both the undergraduate and graduate level. So I'll speak concretely to our MBA program. So prior to becoming the Associate Dean, I was the director of our MBA program. And we decided that AI is just going to be a part of every core class, and whatever that means to the specific class, right? If it's finance, if it's marketing, it doesn't matter. It's that you really need to be thinking about what tools would someone graduating from finance or marketing or management, what kind of tools would they need? On the surface level, there's ChatGPT and all these sort of like tools that everyone has access to. But it goes deeper than that. I know James is the expert, so I'll turn it over to him for all these other like more sophisticated tools. But at minimum, if we know employers are looking for these employees and looking for this skill set, we have an obligation to make sure that we're addressing those needs.
Well, some of this is also a branding issue. So AI is an umbrella discipline that's existed as a term since the 1950s. So for our faculty who are teaching things like predictive analytics, they're telling the community, this is AI. We've been teaching this for years. So sometimes there's sort of a miscommunication issue where a lot of businesses are focusing on generative AI, and they're not thinking about the other disciplines that exist within that sort of umbrella term. But to Jim's point, what we're looking to do is to fully integrate meaningful AI experience into the entire curriculum. And we need to sort of attack this at a programmatic level. So students are coming in and they're going to be multiple touch points along the trajectory of their course in which they're using AI in a way that's meaningful and ethical, but also in a way that builds up a portfolio of skills and experiences that they can use to sort of demonstrate to future employers.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what made you guys realize that it wasn't enough to have an add-on certificate or have this be an elective, and how you made the decision to really embed this across every course?
I'm going to use Jim's improv experience here. If you want to demonstrate that you have skills, you need to have the confidence to accept that you're going to listen to the environment and then respond. And the only way that you can do that is when something becomes natural. It's reflective. So if we create this environment where we're just giving someone a certificate program or an elective course that builds on top of the program, they're not going to have that natural ability to use those skills without thinking. But if you build it into the program, everything they've done, they've gone through the internal sort of calculation. Does using AI help or hinder here? So one of the skills that we're developing is for students to say, you know what? No, AI is not the right tool to use in this situation. And here's the reason why. And again, that's the beauty of someone who is confident in an improv environment. They're able to walk into any environment and they can respond in the moment appropriately. So again, I'm stealing Jim's thunder here.
Yeah, I love that, James. That's a yes and mentality. So look at the coming together. So I'll add on to that. I think what we're also teaching is this idea of technological agility, right? So part of your question is, why did we just do an MBA AI program, right? Like the entirety of the program is AI. And that would be silly. The analogy I would give is, what if we did an MBA calculator program or an MBA internet program? Like those tools change. Technology changes. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, in this moment right now, yes, it's moving at a rapid pace, more rapid than we've seen before. But like AI of today will not be AI of tomorrow and what's in the future. And these young people are going to be going out in the business world, yes, in this moment where AI is forming the conversation. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that may look very different. And these people will still be in the market. They'll still be out there doing business. And so I think, we had a very strong conversation about, do we make it an AI program? Is that a whole like concentration within the field? And the answer is no, because the issue is then it's very siloed, right? Because then now you're focusing on one specific thing, or only a subset of students who choose to focus on that AI piece are getting the exposure to it, when in fact everybody needs to be fluent, at least at some level, in this technology, and be adept, because it will change. Like if anything we know to be true, the technology will continue to evolve. I mean, every day I think James sends a message like Gemini 3's out, right? Like there's always something happening, and you've got to be able to be nimble in that regard. And that's really what we're teaching in our program.
Yeah. We talk a lot here about just the importance of the skills that students are learning, and the skill is so essential in AI. Understanding how and if and when to embed AI alongside that skill is critical, and it's different than learning AI as a tool.
Well, to add on to that, so I just revamped our marketing research class at the undergraduate level, maybe like not even 2 years ago. And we introduced R. So, right, they're coding, the students are coding, and that can be very overwhelming for students, like learning a foreign language for many of them. And if you make one small mistake, like one extra space or a wrong parenthesis, then like the whole thing is just bonkers, right? So within not even 2 years, I revamped the entire course to integrate vibe coding because AI makes doing R so much easier. You don't have to learn the language. But at the end of the day, you still have to know what's going on, right? Like you can't just have the code, generate a market segmentation, and just pretend like you know. The tool, it's a tool, right? So if you can teach things like vibe coding or using AI as a tool, while also teaching the fundamental concepts of marketing and finance and accounting, that's what we should be doing because this is the kind of work they're going to be doing in the real world.
I can imagine that this wasn't a unanimous decision from day one. What did the process look like internally to get here, and what kind of resistance or support did you have?
Like all the good things in life, it was messy. It wasn't something that was pleasant to look at. But that's the beauty of working at a university. You've got multiple disparate views and a tendency towards skepticism. So the way that the faculty brain typically responds to any new thing is by saying, prove it, show me. I'm not too sure if what you're saying is necessarily true. So it's sort of a slow process, little wins, demonstrating how something is applicable to someone. But the thing that changes us is we're a business school. So we understand market realities and we're focused on student outcomes. So we can see the ecosystem at the moment. We can see that it's harder for some students to get the job that they think they might want. So we need to create a way to allow them to get to that place. And the other thing that's changing is students used to come to universities thinking, okay, I'm going to join the big firm, And that's changed. Now they're going to come out and maybe they're going to be an entrepreneur. Maybe they're going to start a business or join a small business. So again, the powerful thing that I think changes our faculty and staff is realizing that we have to be very nimble to provide these in-demand skills for students right now. So even if someone's reluctant with AI, if they think that perhaps there are some inherent dangers of embracing this, they also understand the urgency of at least sort of providing those skills to students to make them, be able to demonstrate informed decisions.
Yeah, I know one of the most common questions, if not the most frequent question I receive from prospective MBA students is, how is AI integrated into the program? Like that's an expectation for students coming into at least graduate programs these days. I wouldn't be surprised if undergrads had sort of the same feeling. The other thing I've noticed, it's kind of funny, I've given many talks. I do a lot of consulting stuff out in the city in Chicago. And in the classroom last year, I saw everyone had their laptop open to ChatGPT. Everybody, right? I was sitting in the back room and I saw this. And then I won't say the company, but I was at doing a workshop and every employee had their laptop open to ChatGPT. So like to James's point, to pretend like this is not driven by the market would be foolish. But in terms of adoption, of course you have faculty who are like, I've taught my class this way for 25 years, don't tell me. And it's like, great, but then the market's going to dictate that if someone else is teaching a different section where they've incorporated AI, then students will flock to that because that's what they're looking for. And so I think, we were revising our MBA program really at an opportune time before this stuff, or kind of as all the new generative AI stuff started coming out. So we just made it a prime feature that every core class had to have AI integration. And we left it up to the faculty to determine what that looked like. But you've probably seen the evolution where people were really afraid of it, right? Because how can I assign papers anymore? And what you've seen is how in real time faculty have changed their curriculum so that maybe instead of a 30-page paper, which feels outdated anyway, maybe record a podcast or maybe use generative AI to create a prototype. Like there are many really valuable uses for it that actually enrich the learning experience and can help drive points home a little more clearly for students. I don't know. Maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but from what I've seen with faculty, a lot of folks have really embraced it and have enhanced the classroom experience here at DePaul.
Yeah, that's so interesting. We were talking about, we just came back, it's the fall conference circuit and how different the conversations were this year from last year, where last year was, how do we stop students from using AI to do coursework? And this year it's, how do we ensure students are doing AI in their coursework? And what a 180 in less than 12 months, and how difficult that must be to navigate internally with a lot of change, and knowing just some of the hurdles to implement curriculum pivots. But you mentioned students, and that students are asking about, is AI going to be a fundamental part of the education that I'm getting? I want to talk about that a little bit more, both from a, essentially a product positioning side. How do you position your program in the market to students? How does that affect the way that you're talking about your program and how you're building messaging around your programs in market?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. And I think one cool thing about DePaul is we've always been very applied and practical by the very nature of our geographic location, right? We're in the heart of Chicago in the business district. And for many years, I can speak to this from both the undergrad business program, but primarily the grad business program, you'd have professionals working during the day and then coming across the street to do an MBA or an MS program. And so our curriculum has always been geared toward what can we teach in the classroom that you could apply tomorrow when you go to work. And so I think that's part of the positioning here, which is, as you opened the podcast with, companies want employees that have these skills. And there's also a training deficit. This is a noted phenomenon in the industry where they just don't have the time or the expertise to train folks how to use AI on site. And so for us, that idea, like leaning into that very practical Vincentian mission of delivering these needs to these students, it was a really natural fit. Now, that said, of course, you run into issues with students where maybe they don't use AI in the right way. And that's the other benefit of being at a school of higher education is if you're going to do that, like make the mistake now, learn the lesson before you go out in the real world so that you're making sure you're using this tool, like any tool that you're using ethically. But we provide sort of a safe sandbox to try these new tools out, understand the ethics behind it, and then importantly, know how to apply it to your job to create value for your company.
Did you have conversations around whether AI would be a turnoff for some students? I know several of us have kids in high school age who are almost anti-AI. What conversations were you having about that, and whether students might opt out if that's something that's required?
That's a great question. So one of the nice things that we have in business is we have certain programs where we're bringing in students who aren't traditional business students. So maybe they're coming in for a couple of elective classes, or maybe they're coming in for something that's going to give them a foundation to use in their other college. So for example, we have, musicians, we have theatrical performers, we have people who are going to go on to be writers, who are coming in to get critical business skills. And yes, you're right. A lot of those students do have some valid concerns about the use of AI. But I think the role of the university is sometimes to make people feel uncomfortable in a safe situation. And we sort of believe, Jim and I, that the only way that you can say no to something is if you're fully informed. No should not be a reflective statement without understanding the impacts and the reasons for saying no. So you need to introduce things to students that might make them uncomfortable. But as Jim articulated earlier, a lot of our faculty are aware of the inherent biases and dangers in large language models, how they might respond differently to certain students in certain environments. And then the other part of that you alluded to is really interesting. There's a lot of research at the moment that suggests that the older generation is embracing generative artificial intelligence, and the younger generation isn't. And that creates a really interesting tension in the classroom, but that's where the best learning happens. We don't want students just to walk into a classroom and just be sponges for knowledge. We want them to push our faculty, because that way the faculty respond to those pointed questions and it becomes a truly magical learning experience.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on that. I think of this like a marketer, right? So you always have to know what the competition is doing. Even if you decide not to do that, or you differentiate yourself as like, I write poetry from my heart, or my song genuine breakups, not like AI generated stuff. But other people are using it for those reasons, right? And so the same thing for our students. It's like, hey, you might not like vibe coding. You might really like getting into the weeds and understanding the language of R or Python, and that's great. But I promise you, there are students at institutions steps away from here who are going to be using AI to do their coding. And depending on what the market rewards, like, again, you don't have to like it. You can go to companies where maybe we'll start seeing organic versions of things. Like, we don't use AI. I heard, the former Twitter guy, Jack Dorsey, I think just started a new, or restarting Vine as Revine or something, where there's no AI allowed, like no AI video produced. So that's interesting, is because there may in fact be markets for that, and people may vote with their dollars on the types of content or products or services they want, and that's okay. But I think one cool thing that we feature, so I'll give an example from our undergraduate program. All of our first year students do a business pitch competition. It's actually coming up this Friday, very exciting. And they have to design a prototype. Like, they have to include a prototype. And what you find is that for some students, it gives them the opportunity to explore some image generators or some video generators now, right? To do a short commercial. To those students, helps them realize, I can take an idea that I have in my mind that I can't necessarily articulate, or I don't have the artistic ability to draw it, and I can use these tools to, almost like a superhero, take my idea and make it something great. And then you have students that are like, nope, I want to do a pencil drawing on the back of a napkin, like a napkin sketch. And there's something authentic and cool about that. And I'll tell you, both prototypes are totally fine, right? So I think it's just really expanding their brain, as James said, to realize these are other tools out there. You get to decide what you want to do, but recognize, like, you can close your eyes all you want to what's happening around you, but this is the world we currently live in, and it's our job to expose you to that.
Do you think that's connected to, you alluded to this and we've talked about this before, of students, the traditional path is not really the reality for most graduates anymore. You go get your degree, you're hired by a big company, you climb the ladder, and this kind of entrepreneurial, not just entrepreneurial spirit, but entrepreneurial understanding of how to get things done and how to play the role of multiple people. How do you think this just changes the role of business schools and the scenarios that they're preparing graduates for?
Take this one first. It's funny because obviously with education, one of the biggest fears that educators and entire admin teams had was, will this replace classroom learning? Will this replace the traditional university? And I think there will be changes, obviously, like things, technology changes the way we deliver our product and service. But I think one benefit we have being at a business school is there will always be a business behind AI or integrated into it, right? You got to sell these things. So we are kind of, I don't want to say we're completely shielded to maybe some of the pains, but we're a bit unique in that there's always going to be a business side. And to answer your question more directly, I think what we really do in business school is we help people identify problems and then develop solutions, any number of solutions in the forms of products, services, or experiences that address those issues and create value for people. That's what we do. And so the fundamental philosophy of what a business school does is not changing in any way. We have a new tool, right? And we can outsource some work. So maybe that part is changing. But I think like anything, is it disruptive? Sure. Like things are being disrupted, but so too was the assembly line, right? So too was the internet. So too was the calculator. So it's just a matter of then figuring out what new roles are being created as a result of this technology. How does business, the process of finding problems and developing value-based solutions, how does that evolve with the tool? I know that answers your question, but I feel like, I don't want to say not much has changed because obviously we see the world is changing, but the fundamentals are all still there.
Here's a quick word from our sponsor. Southeast Missouri State University needed to launch more targeted campaigns faster, yet they were bogged down by manual campaign builds, slow approvals, and vendor overload. With Element 451, they eliminated 5 vendor tools and gained marketing superpowers in one platform. They saw a 13% increase in applications, processed applications within 2 days, and achieved 33 to 35% email open rates. The impact: personalized, automated campaigns running at scale without the drag. Ready to turn your next campaign around in hours, not weeks? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents.
So back in January of this year, there was a jobs report that was published, and it basically demonstrated 40 to 60% of current jobs are going to be significantly impacted by artificial intelligence. And a lot of people sort of took away from that the jobs, the skills, the opportunities that people saw traditionally are going to no longer be there in a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. And I think students are listening to that message and they're realizing that, okay, if I know that the job that I think is going to be ready for me by the time I graduate isn't going to be there, then I need to prepare myself for something new. And what better thing for a student than to come out saying, I'm going to form my own company, or I'm going to start my own business. And if we can provide them with the skills to do that, that's going to be huge for this country, because that's the way that we sort of weather this storm of disruption. AI is changing things in ways that are sort of small and significant. But if we can raise a generation of people who are able to adapt to that change, then we weather that storm. So I think that's one of the powerful things that our faculty are communicating to our students, and our students are communicating to our faculty. There's a great conversation taking place at the moment.
That's so good to hear. I mean, I think even too, outside of becoming your own founder of a company, there's a different set of skills when you work for a small to mid-sized company, and you bring in a lot of that ownership almost, of your function or the work that you're doing that you would if you were an entrepreneur running a company, and a lot of the skills, the autonomy, and also the accountability, which might look a little bit different in a huge organization that is very specialized.
Yeah, can I give a quick anecdote to this? Because there's a student, I'll spare the name of the company, but I have a student who went to a very, very famous consumer packaged goods company somewhere in the Midwest that still keeps it pretty generic, but you can guess at home. So what was so cool is she was coming out of the undergraduate program. She stuck around for an MS degree, and what she was so successful at doing in that role was integrating AI and automation in a way that this very, very famous CPG company with very, very talented MBA grads from all over the world could not do, because that's not what they were trained to do, right? So part of her value coming out of higher education, coming out of a traditional university setting, was she played with all these tools. And where else do you have the luxury, a safe space of playing with all these tools? And then the value you provide to the marketplace is, hey, you're brand new, you've got a fresh set of eyes and a fresh set of skills that nobody else around here has. So as an intern, she was implementing new solutions and automating things that they had no idea you could do. And frankly, that's a big part of the reason. She's great in every capacity, but like a big part of the reason was, boy, did she demonstrate value that first summer that she entered at this company. And they were eager to give that offer, so eager that they were like, no, stick around, do your MS program. We'll take you when you're done. You've got a safe seat here at this company. So I think, to your earlier question, how does this change higher education? Higher ed has always been a place to test out new ideas, to work with researchers with the cutting edge of how does this impact our work? How does this impact our health, our mental health, our psychology, our stability? So in that kind of environment where there are literal labs to test these things out, companies don't have the luxury of doing that. So if we can do it here, that's the value higher ed can provide. And then we send these awesome ambassadors out to all these companies to really implement the ideas that we've brewed up here.
To use that word again, lab. So we talk in our college as Chicago as being our laboratory. And one of the things that I think sort of distinguishes ourselves from our competition is most of our students who graduate stay in Chicago afterwards. Chicago is part of their personality. It's something that's important to them. And one of the things that we're seeing with these entrepreneurs is they're seeing gaps or deficiencies in their communities, and they're coming out with the business skills and the entrepreneurial mindset and the knowledge of the AI, and they're making positive changes in their community. So one of the great things that Jim and I see is we have alumni coming back, and these are recent alumni. They've been out of the university for maybe 2 or 3 years, and they're coming in and showing incoming students and current students what they're doing in their community. And again, that's huge. I think the thing that makes, Jim and I and our colleagues want to come to work every day is the students who come in here, they're not just looking for a job. They're looking for something that's sort of meaningful that they're going to do when they graduate. And it is just transformative to see that. Someone to say, I saw this gap. Food is not in my community. Schools are not in my community. Businesses are not in my community. I'm going to come in and I'm going to change that. And they do.
Do you think that's connected to the idea of, DePaul's mission and how you're able to blend that mission and connect with the students who really...
And here's the critical thing. So I'm not religious, but the mission from Vincent DePaul says a critical thing. It says it's not good enough to be pleasant to one person, to do good to one person. You've got to be able to do this at scale. Every person that you interact with, it has to be meaningful and beneficial to that person. And that's where the advantages of machine learning and AI come in. Because now if you do it right, you can do something that's meaningful, that's beneficial, that you can do at scale. And that's something where the mission of our institution, the university, ties in really well with the beneficial opportunities that AI and machine learning can present.
Yeah, and we integrate that and even into our everyday jobs, right? For me, James, and others here, where part of DePaul's mission since it started was to be a transformational university. And I won't pick on our friends at other places. Every institution is wonderful in its own way, but we really do embrace that mission of taking a first generation college student and then showing them the way of the world, right? Showing them all the opportunities, illuminating those pathways that by nature of maybe not having a parent that went to university, that was my situation. I was a first gen college student. I didn't know what was on the other side. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, went on to do a PhD, and now I'm a professor. But that was because of people who took the time to illuminate those paths for me, to teach me the technology. And so, to bring it back to this context of AI and learning these new tools, we are trying to level up everyone. And I think that's what we really excel at here is we transform students. When they come in as freshmen to when they leave as seniors, or if they're coming back for grad school, you will leave a changed person by coming to this program, because that is our mission and our responsibility to make you a person of even greater value to your community and to society.
I wanted to take those stories of outcomes and tie it back to kind of why they choose DePaul and how they discover DePaul. And James, earlier this year, you joined Everspring's CEO, Beth Hollenberg, on stage at several conferences talking about AI disruption in the student discovery process. And DePaul hasn't just been ahead on curriculum. You've been ahead on the marketing curve, working with Everspring to adapt content strategy, but also the technical infrastructure to stay visible as students are turning more and more to AI, also for their college research. How do you think the curriculum and marketing are inherently intertwined?
I think it's through stories. So if you think about your life, the meaningful things that happen to you, you can articulate as a story. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. You see sort of this transformation that Jim's been mentioning. So one of the things that I think we've been good at is making sure that we can tell stories. And these stories happen best when they are related, articulated by current and former students. And the power of that is if you do this well, if you have this sort of community conversation taking place, it starts to get ingested by the large language models. And these large language models now are frequently used by prospective students as a way for them to make decisions as to which university is going to be right for them. And they're posing intricate questions along the lines of, I'm a Star Trek fan who loves hockey, who enjoys, horse riding at the weekends, but wants to go to a university that has X, Y, and Z. It's things that we couldn't think of at this end. But they're using these models basically to design the ultimate outcome that's highly personalized. So they're no longer going to regular websites. They're no longer talking to the friends of parents or sort of academic advisors, but they're using AI, large language models to find that unique path for them. So the thing that we've been doing really well is we have made sure that the information that's coming up organically, the stories from these current and former students, surface in a way that large language models understand. So some of it's the way that you write this, some of it's the way that you tag it using the appropriate schema behind the scenes. And that work pays huge dividends because, again, what we're going to see is a huge change in the environment where the methods that worked for some institutions in the past aren't working, and the money that's being spent on that is essentially wasted. But if, universities can pivot towards that, it's going to be to their benefit.
Yeah, I'll say that famous marketing research class that I spent a lot of time updating because technology changes every day. We do answer engine optimization. We do AI search optimization. These are skills that a year ago I wouldn't have included, but now are essential, right? Because again, even when people don't Google things anymore, they ask ChatGPT or they're asking Alexa. So understanding that infrastructure, like James said, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that most people don't even think about in terms of how that architecture is designed or infrastructure is designed. And then, a lot of historically higher education marketing is top down, right? So it's somebody at the top is like, this is the brand campaign. It's going to run for 10 years or whatever. Nice colors, nice little tagline, let's get some billboards and that's great. In 2025, we still do that, right? Because you kind of have to. But I think more importantly is there's this organic bottom up sort of experience. And so whether that's blog posts, whether that's students creating video content, that of course we can capture data from that and audio from that as well. It is really talking to James's point about the stories, and it's hearing from the students. And I think, DePaul is in Chicago. We have the Midwestern humility, like we don't like to brag, right? We're not like our friends on the coast. But I will say, back to that transformative piece, that's a story that we know is true. We've been on, rankings and things about this transformational ability of our university. And boy, is that story even more effective when you're hearing it from the people whose lives you've transformed, right? I mentioned the student earlier who got the job at the CPG company, first generation college student, right? And is entering into a 6-figure job right out of undergrad at a higher level position. That's the kind of transformation. Those are the sorts of stories we want to be what prospective students and parents are hearing. That's better than whatever cute tagline we put out there. Sure, that's lovely. But let's hear from the students. Let's hear about their experience and how transformative our education was from them.
Andrea, could I invite you into this piece of the conversation too? I know your team is looking at both the content strategy and authenticity in building that story alongside the technical components that need to be true in order to be discovered. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as we think about the interconnectedness between curriculum and marketing, it couldn't be more true than the conversation we're having here. When the way students learn changes, the way they discover has to change as well. So what DePaul is doing academically mirrors what's happening in the marketing landscape. And we're seeing a shift from teaching the tool to teaching the application, just as Jim and James have already shared. So in marketing, AI has focused us to rethink visibility really at the foundational level. And so we're no longer competing only in the traditional ways students are searching, but now we're competing inside the AI conversations where students are asking questions about the best programs for their goals, their budgets, their career paths. It's a very personal process. And really, DePaul has leaned into this shift in several important ways. I'll share a couple of examples if I can. First, AI is now a part of the performance engine. Through Google Performance Max, we've allow machine learning to determine the best audience and channel and really the moment for each prospect. It's only the right time when it's the right time for them. And so we want to make sure that that storytelling that James talked about is ever present. And so that approach has really helped DePaul reduce cost per lead by 36% while increasing the conversion to more than 50%. And so this is a significant efficiency is gained at a time when we're seeing the digital costs increase in higher education more than ever. We've also restructured some of the content for AI discovery. Students are no longer typing quick questions. I know I personally re-ask the question if I don't get the answer that I want. They want to ask complete questions like, what's the best path to becoming a CPA, or which online MBA helps with my career pivot I'm thinking about? And so we want to make sure that that content is answering the questions directly and very clearly. And so those Google inclusions of AI overviews and tools like ChatGPT are citing it directly from, the websites, because we've ensured that, the content is updated and accurate. And we saw almost a 200% increase in keyword visibility, placement, and really meaningful engagement from new blog content that attracts thousands of unique visitors on a regular basis. So that's not traditional SEO. That's building content for an AI mediated discovery. And then finally, want to share that, connecting that visibility to enrollment, it has to be our top priority. It doesn't matter if it's not bringing students into the classroom to continue their learning and their journey. And so we want to make sure the real value is understanding whether that visibility leads to the higher intent prospects, that faster conversion, and honestly, better cost per start, so that we've got stronger funnel performance. Across the industry, we're seeing that students who begin their search with AI are more informed and more decisive. And so we want to make sure that by the time the students reach the university, they already have a clear sense of what they want, because we've helped inform that. So what DePaul is doing in the classroom by teaching students how to apply AI aligns directly with what we're doing in marketing to make sure that the program is visible, credible, relevant, and present, and that the core question has really changed from how do we get students to find us, more focused on how do we show up where they're already asking questions. And the curriculum and marketing are no longer separate conversations. They support each other in this new era of discovery and decision making, and it's an exciting place to be.
Okay, I have to ask this because it was so unexpected to me and at the same time made so much sense to me, which is on improv. And as we have this conversation, on one hand, we're teaching students how to become fluent in having conversations with machines and getting what they need out of AI. But on the other hand, human connection is so essential to career mobility and influence and growing your network. Jim, can you share a little bit about where you see improv fitting into business education, what you see students getting out of that?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of a weird background that I have. So I grew up doing improv. I did stuff at Second City and graduated from a conservatory program. So improv is near and dear to my heart, the Tina Feys and Amy Poehler's of the world. But at the same time, I'm a scientist, right? And I love technology. I'm a tech nerd. I read The Verge every day. Like, I want to know what's happening in the world. And so I think, part of my research has looked at what happens when we engage with technology, anthropomorphic technology or smart technology. And in some scary ways, the social needs that we normally have to fill, these very basic Maslowian needs, what we found is if you're made to feel lonely, typically you look out for other people to reconnect and fulfill that social need. But what we find is engaging with anthropomorphic technology actually mitigates that need to connect with others. And usually when people hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, doomsday scenario, people are going to just be dating machines and that's it. It's all over for human engagement. And that's not true, right? That's not what the research actually shows. I think about this a lot as an academic. And what I've realized, even from my own research, is part of the benefit of using AI and knowing these tools and engaging this technology is that actually frees up my time to have more deep, meaningful relationships and conversations with people. So I think that there's a way that these two things can peacefully coexist, two things can be true. I do worry, right? I am mindful of the research on the effects of AI, friends can have on children. And so there are, any new technology, there's going to be some concerns. But in terms of social skills and sort of the quote unquote soft skills we teach in business school, we still teach those, right? Because to be a good leader, yeah, you can ask ChatGPT for a rubric or some advice on having a hard conversation with an employee, but you still have to have that conversation with the employee. And it's going to look really weird if in the middle of that conversation, you're going over okay, what do I say? Right? That's a little silly. So I think, I'm an optimist. I think two things can be true. We can leverage technology and use it in really novel ways to actually deepen and strengthen our relationships. But at the same time, technology will not fully replace the human-to-human interaction that we have. Is it changing that dynamic? Sure. But then I think back to social media, right? When the Facebook came out, when it had the in front of it, I am that old. I remember thinking oh man, is this going to change my engagement? But think about the people you stayed in touch with over the years from high school and beyond that had you not, then every 10, 20 year reunion, now it kind of has a different flavor to it. Because I know what's going on in your life. It's on social media. I see it from time to time. So I think if you think about that sort of experience analogous to what's happening now, certainly AI is going to change the nature of our human-to-human relationships, but we're still going to have them. And in fact, they might even be more meaningful as a result of the technology being present. It's not all doomsday.
That's such a powerful way to close, I think. And maybe before we wrap, can I ask you each this question, which is, a year from now, what do you hope looks different either at DePaul or in business education more broadly?
James, you want me to go first? I'm an improviser. Okay. So I think, more broadly, and we brought it up earlier, this conversation that some students are uncomfortable with AI, some, educators are uncomfortable. I hope we get to a point of comfort. And what do I mean by that? I'm using the example of social media as an analogy, where the companies knew that some of their tools were having some negative effects on people, primarily young women. And so rather than do something about it, they kind of sat on it for a while until it became known, and then they did something about it. And so I hope that humankind has learned their lesson. And so I hope that we can embrace all the good value that AI is bringing in a variety of capacities at work, in school, in your day-to-day life, but also being very mindful of the shortcomings or the potential negative consequences, and not just like cover them up and then deal with them 10 years from now, but highlight them, point them out, and then try to figure out how do we manage the negative with the positive so that there's a positive experience overall for different users, and embrace fully people who decide to go the organic route and not use technology. Like, there's beauty in handcrafted stuff in much the way that we prefer that to a machine crafted product in our house, right? So I hope we just kind of get to a level of peace where everyone kind of accepts AI as an option and recognizes for its value, acknowledges its risks, and we all peacefully advance as human beings.
So I love your question. And here's the way I'd think about this. If you were to take someone from the past, the past 200, 300 years, and you were to bring them to present day, they would be confused. They wouldn't know anything. But if you put them in a classroom, they're like, oh, I recognize this. I know what's going on. And the thing that's sometimes a little bit scary is the way that we teach in the West hasn't really changed for a couple of hundred years. Designed by the Prussians. And the concept is you've got scarce resources. Books are scarce, professors are scarce. So we teach in a way to make those two scarce resources as efficient as possible. Those resources aren't scarce anymore. With artificial intelligence, knowledge is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And now we need to change the way that we teach. So I've had conversations with students where they've sort of articulated that being in a class for 90 minutes or 3 hours isn't always conducive to learning, because the two critical pieces of learning are reflection and demonstration, presentations. So if you can concentrate on those, that's going to be to the benefit of learning. So the cool thing that we could see in a year from now is you walk into a classroom and it doesn't look the way that it has for the past couple of hundred years. It's a place that might be a little bit confusing to you. You're not too sure what's going on because we've changed the nature of that relationship. So in the class, the students who are interacting with Jim aren't sat in their chairs looking at a book or writing down what Jim is talking about. They're actively engaged with each other, doing something that is important because they're all in a room at that particular time. But they've come in and they've understood the information because they've got personal AI chatbots that can allow them to follow a guided learning path so they become proficient. They've used AI to present numerous times until when they come into the classroom, they are proficient at telling the story that they want to share with their fellow students and the professor. So I think we can do that, and that's how things, I think, should change.
Sad. Change is hard, right? And it's exciting to hear all of the wonderful things that you all are doing at DePaul. And there are some institutions that are a little fearful of taking those leaps. So I think one of the things that I'm hopeful to see is that we have broader adoption. Let's integrate AI into how students are learning and problem solving and communicating, and see the value of the tools that are in front of them and available. And on the marketing side, we know students are moving through the process a bit faster because there's more information at their fingertips. And so that should change how schools think about visibility and outcomes and cost per start and all the things we've talked about. So I hope that the one thing that looks a little different is better alignment, more engagement and adoption across curriculum and marketing and the student experience to make sure that students, that we're reinforcing that readiness for an AI-enabled workforce that we're helping prepare the world for. The schools that make that shift are going to see better students, honestly. They're going to see a better fit and, in the end, better performance and results.
It's really exciting to not just think about, but hear how you're actually changing business education and shaping it into the next evolution of what it could become. And what really strikes me is that you're not just teaching tools and how to use the tools. You're really fundamentally rethinking where business education fits into a world where the old playbook doesn't work anymore. And you're doing it with such intention, with your values intact and with real attention to what students actually need to thrive in their early career and then all the way through. So thank you so much to our guests, James Moore and Jim Mourey from DePaul, for being ahead of the curve and for sharing what you are learning with all of us. If you want to learn more about DePaul's AI initiatives, where should folks go?
There are so many ways. So you just go to ChatGPT, to Claude, to Gemini, ask your questions there. You're going to get it.
I love that. And if you're interested in how AI is reshaping student search and discovery, you can check out Everspring's research at everspringpartners.com. I'm Rhea Vitalis. Thanks for listening to First Movers, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.